into these industrial symbiosis aspects. So I will pass the floor to my dear friend George Tendes. He's a mining engineer like me from the same school, National Technical University of Athens, specialized in environmental economics. He has a PhD and water technologies and management with an MSc. He has worked in an environmental consultant specializing in water management, hydrology, mining, waste, and industrial activities. He has more than 20 years of experience in environmental and social aspect assessment, studies, and methods. His latest accomplishments are consultant and coordinator of the World Bank team for environmental and infrastructure policy reforms in Greece, environmental impact assessment for recycling, mining and renewable energy investments, water, soil, and ecosystem management systems and tools, technical studies for waste management and brownfield rehabilitation. I think he's good enough to talk with us about his subject. George, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Tassos, for the warm welcome. Thank you very much, Christian and the team of European Aluminium for the invitation, first and foremost, and for the great level of organization. Everything is running very smoothly up to now. And I guess this will be the case until the end of our workshop. I'm here because my company, GREEN2SUSTAIN, is participating in the project Removal about alternative technologies for utilizing bauxite residue. And I'm here as an environmental consultant to talk about stakeholders and how we deal with them during the policy making and the project governance stages. So, what is a stakeholder? Literally, stakeholder is a person or a group which knowingly or even unknowingly takes all the stakes or some of the stakes in a project. And the stakes are related to personal time, to financial resources, to environmental resources, and other social amenities. If we drill deeper into the subject, stakeholders are very much affecting the policy, not only of a company, but of entire states, especially in the European Union. So we have connected policy to the stakeholder, let's say, attitudes and viewpoints, and we will see how this affects the way we govern important projects like the ones of circular economy, for example. So whenever there are stakeholders, we need to do a social assessment or a stakeholder analysis, as it is used to be called in extra-European environments. And we do that whenever we have negative externalities of a project, because positive externalities usually are very warmly welcomed by all. So a stakeholder analysis is not considered important. Wherever we have competing interests of various groups and people, and of course, wherever we have opportunity costs and trade-offs, because there we have to balance objectives of various groups in the society, of various political opinions, and of course, of various technological aspects. Lastly, I would say important issues to address when you are doing a stakeholder analysis is the stakeholder underrepresentation. It's a phenomenon which is observed very often in developing countries and also in isolated parts of developed countries. Finally, disputes wherever we have, let's say, oblique definition of property rights and access to public goods. I would I would say that property rights is an issue that has been under scrutiny since the 60s. And there are various, let's say, philosophical, political, and technical aspect to the points. The bottom line is that the prevailing opinion is that the property rights should always be attributed to someone, whether this someone is the public, the state, or an individual owner. Whenever property rights have not been attributed to any entity, significant challenges emerge for the society. In order to deal and address the stakeholder analysis and the social assessment, in our company and in several others throughout Europe and abroad, we have adopted the World Bank methodology, for which I will give more details in the following slides. The World Bank methodology recognizes three different attributes of individual and groups. These attributes are, let's say, a minimal approach of addressing various targets and various opinions within society. So these attributes are power, legitimacy, and urgency. And whenever we study a project, we tend to, let's say, tag the stakeholders according to which one of these three they own. That way, although a very simplistic model, that way we characterize groups and individuals, and we can better define how to address the audience, the different audiences that emerge, and how we propose communication measures to further, let's say, optimize the interaction of the project with the society. Of course, a group or individual may have more than one of these attributes, and therefore we have combinations, and the characterization starts with power. Groups who have power have their own will. They have means to impose their own will. They have influence to other parts of the society, and they can very easily overcome resistance, but power is very futile. It may disappear very quickly, and it may emerge very quickly. For example, think of a landowner. A landowner has the power and the will, and in many cases may have also the means to define the use of its own land. Nevertheless, if something changes, for example, in the state policy, this power may vanish within one day. So power is a very powerful tool, to use this, let's say, sophistication, but also is a very, very volatile tool. When we talk about legitimacy, then we need to think about agreements. We need to think about relationships. So a group has legitimacy over a project, for example, when the importance of the group stems from an agreement, either formal or informal, with other stakeholders or with the owner of the project. This agreement may not be written on paper. It could be written based on ethical grounds. For example, if a project will take place on a public land, and this land is owned by a group of people, for example, by the pensioners of the national bank of a country, for example, then we have a formal agreement. If someone is a partner in an organization, we have a formal agreement. If two companies decide to explore the chances of a project, we may have an informal agreement. Or we may have ethical grounds in areas where more than two, for example, local communities have traditional bonds. Finally, the urgency stems not from power, not from an agreement, but it stems from a pressing situation, as the word implies. So groups that have urgency over a project may be groups like local communities who think or believe that they have a negative externality over a project, and they require the attention of the public, depending also on the criticality of the issue. Urgency is also time sensitive, because if legislation change or even policy changes, a local community that has no urgency over a project may suddenly develop one. For example, if a special area is being assigned as a renewable energy development area, then suddenly this local community has the urgency first to understand, secondly, to define their own rules on how this development will take place. So for each stakeholder, first we have to make a list of the stakeholders of a project, and this is sometimes a very laborious operation. We have cases in our company where a project finally came up to have more than 120 groups or individuals as stakeholders, but we have to classify the stakeholders into the three categories. And then, depending on which side of the circle each group falls, we have the stakeholder characterization. So we have dormant stakeholders, those in power that need to do nothing about the project because they don't have any legitimacy or agency about it. We have discretionary stakeholders, who may choose or may not choose to do something. And we have demanding stakeholders, those who are in urgency but lack the means of doing anything about it. And we have in-between combinations, which are either positive for a project, like the dominant stakeholders, or we have combinations like the dangerous ones, who have power and urgency but don't have legitimacy, so you never know what they are going to do over a project. Let's see a case. Let's see a case of a project, a BR to products plant that could be built next to a village. If we start mapping the stakeholders, we'll find out that within the legitimacy category, we could have alumina factory owners, workers, licensing and inspection authorities, and all these guys you see in the bullet points on your slides. Some of these guys may also appear under urgency and under power, which means that now we understand that we have dominant stakeholders, which in this case could be the licensing and the inspection authorities. We could have dangerous stakeholders, which could be the political leadership, which lacks legitimacy in some cases. So you never know what they're going to do. And we may have those who are dependent stakeholders, and these are, in our case, the villagers, the NGOs, or even the factory owners. Because if the factory owner does not have the power to move on with the project and depends on other stakeholders, then he is dependent on what the others will do before he can make the next step. We have put villagers and NGOs with an asterisk under urgency, because in this case, in the BR2 products plant, you could never know what the urgency will be about. Urgency about getting rid of the disposal site that currently exists, or urgency about not having a new plant built next to a village. This is also case dependent. After that, we can define the level of public involvement of each type of stakeholder. So we have an inverse pyramid, starting with measures that could be related to any of the stakeholders, up to measures like the direct decision making, for example, which could be targeted to specific ones in order to expedite decision making and policy making. You can see that there is an increment, dialogue, consulting, involving. So we start from the information side and we end up at the empowering stage. So the decision maker can choose to empower certain stakeholders, and this can be decided only after we have identified which ones need empowering. And usually those who lack power may need empowering to expedite the decision making. This is theory. Let's see a couple of case studies just to understand what can be done to address certain issues with stakeholders. So in this case study, this is from the gold mines of Cassandra. The main social barriers was the difficulty to accept the innovative methods, the simultaneous development of multiple sites, and the waste storage that is about to take place in the area. So certain tools were, let's say, utilized to address these issues. Some of them were technical, optimization of the backfilling, for example. Some of them were related to commitments, which were either ethical or even formal, about permits, past liabilities, including certain aspects of investment in the business plan. There were also public demonstrations to convince local communities about certain technological, let's say, decisions. And of course, openness regarding both education and monitoring data. So these types of tools, as you can see, range from empowering, giving the communities the power to influence through official commitments the course of the investment, up to information like the online live monitoring data. In another project, which is related to, again, to waste to products, municipal project, this time the project is not private. The subject of the project is to produce geopolymer products, building products from municipal glass. It's a project that is currently coming to an end this very year. And the main social issues were, again, NIMBY phenomena. Even in a municipal project, people are very reluctant to accept it in their immediate neighborhood. There were issues about environmental impacts, for example, in this case, dust emissions and noise. And also, there is another social issue which is related to the regulatory framework, which is common also to our other project removal, the compatibility with EU regulations for the building projects. In this case, we utilize tools that, again, ranged from information and education, like the local workshops with professionals and also the wider public, and up to demonstrations and research actions to understand how the public can be better addressed and what they are willing to accept. Of course, the state involvement in this case, and this is also an empowerment of those in power, were deeply involved in order to for them to acquire legitimacy over the project, and therefore switch from being a dangerous stakeholder to being the dominant and decisive stakeholder. The last case is again on waste to products and waste to materials, actually. It's a landfill mining project which has ended in the year 2015. And there other social issues emerged. The impact of a landfill mining project on human welfare was very important. The reoperation of a closed landfill site is also an important issue of concern for local communities. And there, again, information, good practices, and further examination of the economical aspects of the project and were used to, let's say, help the project owner, the municipality of Polygyros in Chalkidiki.
2 minutes, George.
20, 15.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. I'm coming to a closure, Tora. Thank you, Tassos. So the conclusions. A stakeholder analysis always aims at supporting the policy making, and not only supporting, I will also add to that, to form the policy making approach. The three categories that the World Bank has proposed, power, legitimacy, and urgency, all indeed seem to be the drivers for the stakeholders, but there is no single remedy. There is no recipe to address a stakeholder, no matter the category, no matter the aspect. All stakeholders should be mapped, and we should always keep in mind that what really matters is materiality. Important stakeholders that can or could make a difference should be addressed. And a small comment for our closure, that we have plenty of tools, but the only thing that matters is how we use these tools to drive the stakeholder engagement process to the desired direction. And the desired direction may not be the one that we started with, but it could be the one that the stakeholders also contribute to. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, George, for respecting the time perfectly. We have 3 minutes for questions. We have enough questions, I understand. First of all, we had a question about the NIMBY syndrome, but I think you have addressed it very well. So you do think that there are tools, provided that you do a proper mapping and some useful, wise use of these tools. Is this correct?
Yes, this is totally correct. We believe that NIMBY phenomena are here, but the proper management and the proper analysis beforehand could save a lot of time and a lot of resources, both financial and psychological, to help projects develop in a better way.
Okay. And from your participation and experience so far from removal project, what do you think are the hot points, hotspots, if there are some in this project?
Well, in my opinion, the hotspot and something that we will drill down to is how the local communities will balance between accepting an already existent situation of a BR disposal site and a new full-scale BR valorization plant. Because both opinions are there in the society. There are people who wish things to stay as they are because they think that they can always get worse. And there are always people who want things to change because they believe that they can influence this change. This is something we should look to very, very closely.
Okay. And one more question from the audience. Why do you use the methodology of World Bank? There is nothing similar from European Commission?
Well, okay, I don't want to claim infallibility in any case, but there are some assessment methodologies for stakeholders which are EU related. The thing is that the Commission requires a public consultation to take place mainly in relation to the EIA process. The environmental impact assessment, that is. So it only provides guidance on functional issues, how this could be done, but not on methodological issues, not on the actual tools that should be used. The only thing that requires is certain deadlines to be applied, that all people should have a voice, all groups should have a voice, yes, but what and how this can be more fruitfully achieved, this is not coming from the Commission, unfortunately, and I see—
it's not a deep dive, yes.
Yeah, I see a room for improvement there. I would be very happy to contribute to that.
This was a very nice question, whoever did it, because we spotted some missing things. Thank you very much, George, and your news were good news for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Glad to hear that.
Okay. Now, do we have list